Hi, thanks for joining me today. I'm Melissa Grimshaw, one of the biomedical research and methodology librarians here at the Yale Harvey Cushing John Hay Whitney Medical Library. This short session is part of our What's the Difference series on evidence synthesis methodology. This video will cover systematic reviews and scoping reviews, two review types that are often confused, but understanding this distinction helps researchers interpret findings and choose the most appropriate review type for their research question. Our learning objectives for this session is that participants will be able to describe the purpose of a systematic review and a scoping review, identify key methodological differences and similarities between the two approaches, and recognize when each review type is most appropriate. Whenever we're discussing evidence synthesis, I like to just quickly mention the availability of librarians to collaborate with you on these projects. Please feel free to reach out to us or to check out our website to hear more about our services. We do also have tools available to assist with your evidence synthesis projects. EndNote is available for download in the Yale Software Library, and Covidence is available through the Medical Library. Please reach out to your librarian or me to gain access. What is a systematic review? A systematic review is one of the most rigorous methods used to summarize existing research evidence. Rather than providing a general overview of the topic, it follows a predefined and transparent process to answer a very specific, focused research question. The process begins with a clearly defined question, often structured using frameworks such as PICO or PICO to specify the population, intervention or exposure, comparison, and outcomes of interest. From there, researchers conduct a comprehensive and reproducible search across multiple databases to identify all relevant studies, documenting the strategy so that it can be replicated by others. After identifying potential studies, reviewers apply predefined inclusion and exclusion criteria and critically appraise the methodological quality or risk of bias of each included research to assess how much confidence can be placed in the findings. The results of the included studies are then synthesized in a structured way, often through detailed evidence tables and qualitative comparison of findings. In some cases, the data may also be statistically combined through a meta-analysis, although this step is not required for a review to be considered systematic. Because of this structured and transparent methodology, systematic reviews are widely used in clinical decision-making, guideline development, and evidence-based practice. What is a scoping review? A scoping review, on the other hand, is an evidence synthesis method used to map the existing literature on a topic in order to understand the breadth, characteristics, and gaps within the evidence base. Rather than attempting to answer a narrowly focused research question, scoping reviews typically address broader or more exploratory questions that aim to understand how the topic has been studied. The goal is often to identify what types of research are available, how the research in an area has been conducted, and what key concepts, populations, interventions, or outcome appear in the literature. Because of this exploratory focus, the results of scoping reviews are usually presented as descriptive studies, evidence maps, or thematic analyses that highlight patterns and trends throughout the literature. Scoping reviews are particularly useful when a topic is emerging, complex, or not yet clearly defined, or when researchers just want to identify gaps in the knowledge and determine whether or not a more focused systematic review might be feasible in the future. This slide highlights the differences between systematic and scoping reviews. Many of which come down to the purpose and the level of focus. Systematic reviews begin with a narrowly defined research question and aim to produce a precise answer that informs clinical or policy decision-making. In contrast, scoping reviews start with a broader or exploratory questions and are designed to map the evidence that exists rather than to evaluate a single intervention or outcome. I often tell teams to think about their research question. In systematic reviews, these are frequently structured like this. In population X, is drug A or B more effective, safer, increased quality of life, whatever outcome measurement you're looking at. In scoping reviews, we would see something significantly more broad, such as in population X, what's the best treatment? Sometimes you'll see teams that complete a scoping review and then do a follow-up systematic review for a more specific question. Because systematic reviews are intended to support clinical decision-making and are generally making a recommendation, they require critical appraisal to assess study quality, whereas scoping reviews typically do not require formal risk of bias assessment, although it is recommended, since their goal is to describe the landscape of research rather than to judge effectiveness. Essentially, if you're recommending a practice change in clinical practice, it's really important that you're providing the reader with an understanding of the strength of evidence behind your recommendation. These differences also shape how the findings are synthesized. Systematic reviews may use qualitative or quantitative analysis, including a meta-analysis, while scoping reviews present descriptive or thematic summaries that often show how the field has been studied. As a result, systematic reviews usually produce actionable evidence, while scoping reviews identify gaps, trends, or point to where future research is needed. One thing to remember while you're thinking about whether you're doing a systematic or a scoping review is the available evidence on a topic. For systematic reviews, you may need studies that have similar designs or outcomes to synthesize your findings across all of your included studies. Whereas in a scoping review, you'll see the summary may include much more diverse study designs. I think it's also really important for this in particular to highlight the similarities between systematic and scoping reviews. There are a lot of scoping reviews that are published under systematic review titles because there's a misunderstanding of the review type in terms of the rigorous methodology versus the purpose of the review or the format of the research question. Both systematic and scoping reviews follow this rigorous methodology that includes structured and transparent methods with a predefined protocol that is registered. Very important that your protocol ends up registered and has reproducible workflows. Both reviews have reporting guidelines with Prisma for systematic reviews, along with a whole bunch of different extensions, and SWIM if you're doing a synthesis without meta-analysis. Scoping reviews do have Prisma for scoping reviews, which is the extension. And so you would use the scoping review extension if you're doing a scoping review. Both review types have documented search strategies in multiple databases. They also both follow the same methodology for screening, which includes title and abstract screening and full text screening that should be done by dual screeners using a predefined inclusion and exclusion criteria that is applied consistently to each record. And when should you use each? Choosing between systematic reviews and scoping reviews largely depends on the goal of the project and the type of question being asked. A systematic review is more appropriate when the research question is clearly defined and the objective is to synthesize evidence in order to answer a specific question. These reviews typically include formal assessment of study quality and risk of bias, which allows findings to support clinical decision-making, guideline development, and policy recommendations. In contrast, a scoping review is used when the goal is to explore the existing literature on a broad topic rather than answer a narrowly focused question. Scoping reviews are particularly helpful for identifying what types of research exist, how a topic has been studied, and where the gaps of the evidence may remain. Instead of evaluating the effectiveness of an intervention or producing a definitive answer, they aim to map the landscape of research and provide an overview of the evidence base in an exhaustive way. One thing you might want to think about when you're working on deciding between a systematic and scoping review is what your planned conclusion is. If you're making a recommendation or a change in practice, you're possibly doing a systematic review. If your conclusion will probably be a call to action, which might be for more research or higher levels of research, i.e., there's only observational data available and you need experimental data to better understand or make a recommendation. Or you just may have a much more detailed conclusion. You may be doing a scoping review. Scoping review and systematic reviews are both rigorous and methodologically sound and highly impactful in the medical literature. While they share some similarities in the structure or approaches to evidence, it is not a matter of one being better or more exhaustive than the other. Instead, the choice between them is selecting the right tool for the research question at hand. This is a very short overview of the differences between the review types. If you're looking for a deeper dive, please feel free to check out our Getting Systematic About Evidence Synthesis or Dipping Your Toes in Evidence Synthesis classes. I would recommend taking a look at the paper linked here from BMC Medical Research Methodology that does a great job at describing the differences between the two review types. I also recommend that to my teams that are not sure whether they plan on writing a systematic or scoping review to take a look at SWIM. SWIM is synthesis without meta-analyses. And in particular, in this reporting guideline, I would recommend taking a look at the data synthesis sections that discuss reporting on the heterogeneity of studies. If you're unable to answer the questions that they're asking, or you don't plan on reporting this information within your paper, you're most likely doing a scoping review, and you should take a look at the reporting guideline for a scoping review. If you're interested in learning more about review types, I'd recommend these two papers. The Grant and Booth paper is a little bit dated, but it provides a great foundation. The Sutton paper builds on the Grant paper, but as you can see, it changes it from review types to review families because there's now significantly more than 14 different review types for you to choose from. It is updated, but it's a bit more complicated, so I would definitely recommend starting with the Grant paper first to better understand the foundation before jumping into the Sutton paper. I also really recommend the What Review is Right for You tool, interactive tool. It can be super helpful. Essentially, what it does is it asks you a series of questions, and then based on your answer, it provides recommendations on what review might be best for you, and it gives you an explanation of why. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me or to your research and education librarian. We'd love to chat with you about evidence synthesis.